record this. Okay, very good. So as we're going to go through, I'm going to give some very broad rules. Again, if you have anything specific in mind, you can either ask me tonight at the class at the end, where I'll be open up for questions, or you can call me or send me emails at any point. Everything is somewhat fluid. So let's talk about the concepts and terms. So we have these halachic ideas, or essentially mechanics, that are used in terms of determining how we kasher an item. The first rule that you'll see in front of you is this Hebrew term, kibol o kach polto. The way something is absorbed is the way that it will be expunged, which means that the way we kasher something is affected by how we use that particular item. I'll give you an example. A pot. A pot is usually used to boil things that are liquid, things like soup, boiling potatoes, boiling eggs. The way we kasher a pot, so for example, if you were making dumplings or you were boiling pasta, the way we kasher that pot is by putting it through the same process that it goes through in terms of how it absorbs the flavor of the pasta. So just as the pasta is boiled in a pot, the way we kasher that pot is also through boiling the pot with hot water, either putting the pot into another pot or filling it up with water, allowing it to boil. And we'll talk about that process soon. But this is the idea that kibolo kach polto, the way that it was absorbed, that is the way in which it will be expunged. The way we kasher the item is determined by how that item or how that utensil is used. The next rule that you see over here is called libun gomur, which is greater or complete incineration. So if you have like a cookie sheet or a baking pan, or even a roasting pan, something that you use to roast meat, those are items that are stuck in the oven. And while it's true, there are some juices that frequently do come out, especially when it comes to meat, the meat is in direct contact with the pan. And so the way we would expunge whatever it is that's been absorbed in the pan is the way that flavor was introduced into that pan, which means that pan has to be incinerated. You put it through an oven. It means that the metal has to grow or to glow red hot. As you'll see over here, the common terminology, or the common temperature that's used is about 800 degrees Fahrenheit. And the reason why we use Fahrenheit is because, while it's true we live in Canada and we use the centigrade system, when we talked about our ovens, for example, our ovens are always frequently have their temperatures determined by a Fahrenheit, and the self-cleaning cycle is at about 800 degrees or so. It's about 700, 750. It's close to 800 degrees. And most halachic authorities have determined that the self-cleaning cycle of an oven is libun gomer. So if you wanted to put your pan through a self-cleaning cycle, that would kasher it completely. However, many pans would be ruined by such a process, so I wouldn't recommend it. I would actually recommend, at least as far as baking pans go, just buying new kosher baking pans. But that is an option. If you do want to put it through the self-cleaning cycle, that is a possibility. Then we have libun kal, which is lesser incineration. If you have an object that is baking, yet doesn't come in direct contact with the food, we allow for a lesser incineration, which means you will turn your oven up to the highest temperature that it can go, and you let it sit like that for about an hour. So oven racks, for example, they're in the oven with food. Occasionally food does touch them, but under most circumstances, food does not come in direct contact with a rack in an oven. So the racks, you do not have to put through a self-cleaning cycle. You can put them through what's called libun kal, the lesser incineration, again, putting it into an oven, letting it sit for 24 hours preferably, but we'll talk about that later, and putting it onto the highest temperature possible and let it sit like that for about an hour. All right, now we have hagala. I used hagala as the example, which is boiling. Pots and pans in which food are in liquids. They're cooked. These things have to be thoroughly cleaned. You let them sit idle for 24 hours, and then you turn them, then you boil water. You have a roaring boil. And by having this roaring boil, you have now expunged whatever it was that was absorbed into the pot. Now, generally speaking, if I take one pot and stick it into another pot, that will be just fine. But if I don't have another pot, I just have a single pot, and I want to make that pot kosher for Pesach, there is a process to this. That is, again, as I've said before, you let the pot sit for 24 hours, you fill it up with water, you let it boil. In the meantime, you stick a stone or a brick into an oven, and you, after that stone or brick has turned red hot, or as hot as you can get it, you throw it into the pot with the roaring boil so that the water flows over the sides and it's still boiling. And that's how you kosher a pot if you do not have a pot large enough to kosher that one item. Now, immediately after you take this pot, after you've koshered this pot or whatever it is, the spoon or the knife that you're koshering, you then take that item and you run it under cold water right away. So that is the lesser boiling. So again, we've covered 3 different ways in which something can be koshered. We have the greater incineration, which is through a self-cleaning cycle. We have libun kal, which is the lesser incineration. We have boiling, which again is how we kosher items that do not come in direct contact with food other than liquids. And then we have iroi, pouring or spilling. So this is the context in which this might come about. If you have, for example, a countertop, and your countertop had, you put down a hot challah on the countertop. You were trying to put it onto a cooling rack and it fell onto the countertop. The countertop is now considered chametzik because it came in contact with hot food. But due to the nature of how the countertop was cold when it came in contact with something that was hot, only the very topmost layer becomes chametzik. So in order to kosher that countertop, you just take boiling hot water and you pour it over the countertop. And we're going to talk more about the practical considerations, but that is iroi, which is the pouring, which is what many people think of when they think of koshering countertops and tables and sinks and faucets and things of that sort, because all of those things are cold that have something hot falling on them. Another example would be is if you're straining your pasta pot into the sink, that water is chametzik. In order for that sink to be kosher for Passover, you have to pour boiling hot water on it. And again, similar to the boiling that we mentioned earlier, that sink or that countertop should not have come in contact with anything hot over the previous 24 hours. It has to be completely clean and completely dry, and then you pour the hot water all over it. Then we have the final, here, and I misspelled this. Then we have the final mechanism or method of koshering, and this is how we kosher something like, something like a drinking cup. A drinking cup that never comes in contact with anything hot, like as a cup that's used primarily for cold, you do much the same. You let it sit in water for 24 hours. You drain the water, you fill it up again. You let it sit for another 24 hours, and then you do this a third time. So over the course of 72 hours, the pot was allowed to sit in water with the water being changed every 24 hours. Now, if you change the water at 27 hours, then the clock gets reset and you have to wait 24 hours from that time that you re-put the new water in. But the water, it has to be sitting in water for 24 hours each time for a total of 72 hours minimum. But there can be more. It can be more. For example, if you let it sit overnight, you're going to have to change the water in the morning and then start from 24 hours from when the new water comes in. So these are the 4 major ways in which the we have libun kal, libun gomer, hagala, iroi, and miloi v'iroi. So these are the 5 different methods in which we kosher things, and we kosher things in the way in which they're used. Again, as I've mentioned, we rely on the concept of kibolo kach polto. The way something is absorbed is the way in which the chametz will be expunged. And all these rules also apply to making something kosher. If you're making your kosher for the first time, we will apply many of these same rules. We also apply some leniencies when it comes to going kosher, but we also have some stringencies when it comes to going kosher. We're not going to talk too much about making your kitchen kosher, but we are going to talk about how to make your kitchen kosher for Pesach. So let's take a look at, all right. We're just going to scroll down over here to the practical considerations, and we'll talk about some more of these ideas as we go down. So let's talk about conventional, continuous clean, and self-cleaning ovens. And that's going to be the major thing. If you want to be able to, make a roast for Pesach, the oven has to be kosher. It has to be kosher. It has to be kosher for Pesach. we say when it comes to chametz that even the most minute amount of chametz will render something not Pesach usable. So when it comes to making sure that your oven is usable, it does have to be kosher. It does have to be kashered. So how do we do this? Well, let's talk about a conventional oven. A conventional oven is a regular run-of-the-mill oven. It's an oven that doesn't have any self-cleaning cycles. It has nothing unique or nothing special about it. It's just an oven. You turn it on and you turn it off with the thermostat, and it will cook your food the way you want it. So the way you clean this oven is, again, because no part of the oven actually comes in contact with the food, we can rely on the libun kal, which is that lesser incineration, the lesser burning. One has to clean out the oven, make it as clean as they possibly can. This includes the racks, this includes the gaskets, this includes every part, it includes the window, it includes every section of that oven, and the inside, it has to be as clean as possible. And we also say that the door on the outside, the part that you can't see when you shut the door, the door is rather thick, that part that sort of juts out into the inside of the oven, the sides of there also have to be very, very clean. What one needs to do is, clean it as you normally would, but one also has to use a caustic cleaner, something like Easy Off. You have to spray it, and you have to get off every stain and every black spot within the oven. If you can't get off the black stain with the first application of Easy Off, you do it a second time. Once you've done it a second time, we say that, okay, whatever flavor there has been destroyed, it's been ruined by the caustic cleaner. So you clean it out. Then you run the oven at its maximum temperature for about an hour. This will kasher that oven and make it usable for Pesach. Not only this, but also the racks on the inside. And we might even throw some other things in there as well in order to ensure that the other things are kosher. And we'll come to what those other things might be. Now, a self-cleaning cycle, as we've said, is a fantastic invention, and we said that it also is considered to be a form of libun gomra, which means that you can kasher the oven, and you can even make pots and pans usable, assuming those pots and pans can survive the temperature. Now, I remember once kashering somebody's kitchen, and they were using some Teflon Teflon ware, and unfortunately, Teflon doesn't survive libun. But I told them, I don't know if it's going to survive, but the family was so keen to keep their pots, they wanted to try it anyways. So they stuck it in, and yeah, it burnt off all of the Teflon coating, and the house stunk. It was awful. Don't do that. If you can get your own pot, a new pot, get a new pot. Don't try to, or rather, this would be like a baking ware. It's probably better to get Pesach stuff. Now, self-cleaning a cycle, as we said before, is great, but again, as I mentioned earlier, it only cleans what's on the inside of the oven. The sides of the oven door, when you close it, the part that you can't see, but that because it juts into the oven, but it's not necessarily in the oven space, that has to be cleaned out as well. But you have to do that very carefully, because very often the gaskets on self-cleaning ovens tend to be very, very not terribly resistant to any kind of abrasion. So you want to be gentle. You want to get it as clean as you can. You want it to be gentle. Now, again, over there, you can actually buy Easy Off for self-cleaning ovens to actually perhaps clean those parts that don't get cleaned in the self-cleaning cycle, like the parts on the outside of the gasket of the door. That does have to be clean. And perhaps getting the self-cleaning oven safe Easy Off would be an option, and that's how we do that. Now, sometimes self-cleaning cycles will not start unless you remove the racks. Now, the racks, we say we like to keep the racks in for self-cleaning cycle, but you have to be careful. You have to look into perhaps do some research and find out if your racks can survive a self-cleaning cycle. Sometimes ovens won't even start through the self-cleaning cycle with the racks inside. So you'd have to remove the racks, run the self-cleaning cycle, and then you turn the oven on for an hour with the racks inside at that time, and that will clean the racks. But those racks, you would have to use the Easy Off in order to clean them. Like we said, one has to do with the libun kal with a conventional oven. Now, continuous clean and steam cleaning ovens, these ovens that have the unique features to them that are always being cleaned, they're called steam clean or aqua lift. Those kinds of cleaning mechanisms do not kasher the oven. So you would still have to even though it might be clean, you would still have to kasher the oven, like we said before, with the libun klal, which again is running it at the hottest temperature you possibly can for about an hour. Oven hoods and exhaust fans, those sorts of things should be clean. You do not have to kasher your hood, you don't have to kasher your exhaust fan, but there is frequently food residue that forms on those items. They should probably be cleaned too. If you don't, it's not going to create too much of a problem, but just for the sake of, you know, doing a thorough job, making sure everything is as kosher for Pesach as you possibly can, you'd want to do that. All right. Let's talk about broilers and broiler pans. Now, broilers are complicated, as I mentioned earlier, because you put the whatever it is that you're cooking directly in contact, especially with the broiler pan. So the broiler pans are not something that you can kasher unless you can put it through a self-cleaning cycle, because it comes in direct contact with the food. The broilers themselves, they do not get hot enough usually to perform libun gamur. So you'd have to do the libun kal business, which means to clean it out as best as you can with the easy off, with the caustic, make sure there are no stains. If there are stains, then you apply a second application of the easy off, the caustic cleaner. Then you run it as hot as you can for about an hour. And you can probably put food into it on Pesach too, but you would have to get a different pan. You cannot use the same pan unless you can put that pan through a self-cleaning cycle. Now, everything that you put into an oven, anything that comes into direct contact with the food also requires libun gamur. So according to many, many authorities, according to Ashkenazi practice, we view frying pans as being like stuff that's in the oven. A frying pan you would have to put through this libun gamur, a self-cleaning cycle, and most frying pans you can't do that. So as such, you can't really kasher a frying pan for Pesach. Warming drawers, I've never seen a warming drawer, but they always come up in the halakhic literature. Perhaps there's something like the dust buster, something that you used to have when you were a kid, and you still have to speak about, but I've never seen a warming drawer. But a warming drawer cannot be used on Pesach. They don't reach hot enough to even perform the lesser incineration, and as such, they should be cleaned as well as best you can, and taped shut, not to be used on Pesach. Now, microwave ovens. Microwave ovens are much like the regular ovens. They have to be completely clean. The way you kasher a microwave oven is you completely clean it. There can be no food residue. It has to be absolutely clean. You take a cup of water, you stick it in the microwave, turn the microwave on for about 15 minutes. You let the steam fill up the microwave. It doesn't have to be 15 minutes, as long as you can see the steam is reaching everywhere. And voila, you have a kosher for Pesach microwave. Now, the tray or the glass plate that's on the bottom, that comes in direct contact with food. You should probably get some contact paper, some parchment paper would probably be the best thing to use, something to ensure that food does not come in direct contact with that glass tray on the bottom, or perhaps if you can, replace it or put some styrofoam on top. Whatever the case may be, you cannot put food directly on that little plate on the inside of the microwave. And that also, I would not recommend that you use the microwave without putting down some parchment paper, because things always spill over. And once you have a liquid that spills over from your soup that you're heating up in the microwave, it spills over because of the boiling. That water or that soup will now sort of act as a conduit to sort of connect whatever is chametz in that little glass plate or the tray, and connect it to what's the pot that you're cooked, or the cup, the mug, or the bowl, whatever the case may be. So make sure that you have that. Make sure you have that paper and that the tray is completely covered up.
So a microwave can be used for Passover? I thought there was no way it could be used.
I believe that it can be. I think that it can be cut.
Okay. One for hot chocolate. Great. It's just not the same when you make it on the stove.
You're kidding me. I can't stand it. Hot chocolate from a microwave.
Oh.
I love it on the stovetop.
There you go. Okay, but once it's clean and you make sure that you do the water thing and you put parchment in there, you're definitely okay to use a microwave for Passover.
That's right. Now, I would say that I would remind you, A, it has to be immaculate, it has to be clean. There can't be any sort of stains or any kind of residue in it. B, again, you can't have used it within the previous 24 hours. Just like we said, now when you put something through when you put something into an oven to roast it or to burn it, you don't have that 24-hour rule. But when it comes to boiling through steam, through liquids, That requires 24 hours.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So let's talk about the Kashering, the stovetop. Let's talk about a conventional stovetop. A conventional electric stovetop, you have these elements that turn red hot. Each one of those elements has to be turned red hot. So you turn each element on until it turns red, let it sit like that for a couple of minutes, and then you can turn them off. Now, I would very strongly advise you to do them one at a time. If you turn them all on, or even just two on at a time, they don't get red hot or as hot as they possibly could. So as such, you would need to turn them on one at a time so that they reach their maximum temperature. The space in between is considered a chametz stick. Food spills on that. Your pasta lands on it when you're stirring your macaroni and cheese. You'll sometimes get macaroni and cheese on the stovetop, in the area between the burners. That area there really should be covered over with foil, if at all possible. If you don't want to use foil there, then you cannot put any pot down in the middle, and any food that lands there will be considered chametz stick. We'll get to glass tops in a moment, but we have an option in that, and because I have a glass top, so I don't have the option of covering it over with foil, because if I were to do so, the glass would crack. I put down a trivet, like a silicone trivet, in the middle there, so I could put pots down and have that available. All right. Let's continue. Let's continue with with an electric stovetop. All right, the drip pans. Many halakhic authorities say that drip pans just have to be cleaned. I like to run them through a self-cleaning cycle when I can, or at the very least, buying those foil inserts that you can buy at the supermarket. It's better. It doesn't create any problem really if as long as you clean it. If there's any food there, that can be a problem, especially if you're boiling water or soup and it runs over, and then the steam gets chametz stick and then it can be ejected back into your pot through the steam. I like to kasher those drip pans, or at the very least cover them over with the foil covers that you can buy for drip pans in the supermarket. But many halakhic authorities and most kashrut agencies say no, they just have to be cleaned. And if that's all you can do, that's also accessible, but I do recommend kashering them also. All right, now let's talk about a gas range, like a gas stovetop. Now, those grates, if at all possible, should be put through a self-cleaning cycle of an oven. Sometimes they can't survive it. They sometimes have rubber feet. Sometimes they have like a finish on them that will be destroyed. So if that's the case, you should try to put them through the lesser incineration, which is you put them into an oven and you allow it to sit there for let it sit there for about an hour on the highest temperature. If you're worried even about that, for example, the rubber, then you just you turn the stove tops on, you turn the gas on for as high as it will get for about 50 minutes or so, and that's considered to be a sort of a de facto kashering. It's not the best thing to do. We preferably like to kasher, but if it's not possible, again, because it has those rubber feet underneath, then that would be the process to making the grate usable. If at all possible, I would probably recommend also, if you can, buying special new grates for Pesach. As I mentioned earlier, the area in between the grates would be considered chametz, and you really should cover over with foil if you can. One thing to be very careful of, if you're going to put foil down, be conscious of where the oven vents the steam from inside the oven. We do find very often that, unlike ovens of about 20 years ago where they vented out the back, they now vent underneath the burners. So be careful. If you're going to put foil down, make sure that you're not blocking the exhaust from the oven so that all the heat and the smoke and the steam can escape. You won't create any problems that way. Just be conscious of where exactly it vents from. If you have a glass stovetop, glass raises a new level of complication. As I said before, the area in between the burners you want to cover over with foil, if at all, whenever possible. With glass, you can't do that, as I mentioned, because it will crack the glass. The best thing to do in that case is, again, turn on each burner to as high as it gets for about 15 minutes or so. Then you would have to put like a trivet down in between the burners if you want to be able to put your pot down and not put it on a countertop. If you want to be able to put stuff down in between the burners, you'd have to put that silicone trivet down That will protect the glass, but also provide an extra space for you to put down your pots. Something I
But
want.
like an induction stovetop, that wouldn't work.
Yeah, there is. If anybody has an induction stovetop, give me a phone call. There are a few complications to that. They can be kosher for Pesach, but if anyone has one, you should give me a phone call. Now, when it comes to the glass, because it's not on a grate, the pot isn't raised above the burner. The pot really, as I said, the area in between the burners is considered to be not Pesach. And if you have a pot that's larger than the burner, if you have liquid that comes down that boils over, that liquid will connect the pot to the non-Pesach part of the stovetop. So the best thing to do is you can buy these special plates that are made for glass stovetops that protect the glass, that hold the pot just slightly over the glass. I have a few of them myself. I use them. In our previous home, we had a glass stovetop. With this house, we're going to just reuse them. You don't want the pot to come in direct contact with the glass if it's larger than the actual burner itself. And because it's a smooth stovetop, if it's larger, it will be in contact with the non-Pesach part. As such, you should get one of these you can find them on Amazon. You can find them all over the place. Just little covers that just hold the pot just above the surface of the glass. Granted that it doesn't cook as well as if it came in direct contact with the glass, but it's the price to pay for Pesach. All right, now the splashback. Many people have the practice of covering over the splashback with foil. That's a good thing to do. I personally don't. It'll probably melt the splashback in the plastic there. The dials that you have on that turn the temperature, those things should be taken off and washed thoroughly, but they do not have to be koshered. Some people do kosher them. I don't think that's necessary. All right. Okay, we've spoken about all this. Smooth top, splash up and knobs. All right, now. Something I did not include here was like a barbecue grill. You can actually kosher your barbecue. I've done it actually here in Calgary. I did it. I would not recommend that you kosher a gas barbecue because the way you kosher will probably destroy this very sensitive and small gas lines, the propane lines. But if you are using a charcoal grill, if you fill it up with coals and you fill it all the way to the top with coals and you have the coals below and above the grill, that grill can be koshered. The assumption is that coals will get metal red hot. You can burn out your grill and you can use that on Pesach. And most of these things that we're saying, if you want to use these items, you have to kosher them before Pesach. A barbecue grill you do not necessarily have to do before Pesach. If you're interested in talking to me about how to do that, give me a phone call. I am happy to speak with you further about it. All right. All right, koshering metal utensils, things like steel, iron, aluminum. Let me just make this correction here. Koshering metal utensils. Now, as I mentioned before, when it comes to using boiling water, the item that you're koshering with boiling water has to have been allowed to sit for 24 hours, not being used first. So what you would do is, again, as I mentioned, you would take that pot that you haven't used in 24 hours, you boil it, you have boiling water in it, as I mentioned before, you have the water going over the sides by adding like a hot rock to it. Now that pot can be used for koshering other items. You would want to take your forks, your knives, your spoons, things that are metal, silverware, kiddush cups, things of that sort, serving utensils. What you want to do is put those into the water, allow them to sit in the water for about 15 seconds, then you pull them out. The best way to do that is with tongs. You can get tongs at the dollar shop, get the metal ones so they don't melt on you, but you can definitely hold them with tongs, but you have to get 2 tongs because you have to, where you're putting one tong down, you have to get a second one to hold it from a different place so that now the boiling water will be on the part of the utensil that was covered by the tong previously. So you're going to need to get 2 tongs to do this. I know that Rav Heinemann always recommends that you tie little strings. So you get a long thing of strings with a bunch of forks on it. You just sort of lower it slowly, and then you pull it out, and string is considered to be porous enough that the boiling water goes through, and you don't have to worry about that. Now, we let it sit there for about 15 seconds, and you take it out, and then you run it under cold water.
Can I ask, are you using like if you use a pot that's specifically Pesach, and then do you have to recasher the pot after you've dipped these things that were chametz?
You don't have to, but the custom is to do so. That's a very good point. That is a very good question. When you're kashering something, you're turning it no longer chametz, right? So it may defeat the purpose if you're going to take have one thing, make it not chametz, and then to make something else chametz. But yeah, the custom is to then boil it again and then use that on Pesach, or put it to the side and not use it on Pesach. That is a very, very good question. All right. Now, here's something interesting. We have a practice. We do not turn meat dishes into or meat forks into dairy forks, or dairy forks into meat forks. However, when you're making something non-kosher for Passover into kosher for Passover, then you can now designate it to be the opposite kind. Generally, we don't do that when it comes to Pesach, because we're changing. We're not turning it milchiks to fleishiks or fleishiks to milchiks. We're just making it chametz into not chametz. In that case, we have, once that door has been opened, you can stick your door in and you can change the use of the item, and now it will be usable for all these for the opposite variety that you want to use. Now, certain materials can't be kashered. Generally speaking, I mean, we have certain rules. Everybody thinks plastic can't be kashered. That's not that simple. Plastic can be kashered. In fact, we have to kasher plastic. There's no way we can operate in a kosher kitchen nowadays without being able to kasher plastic, because everything is made of plastic. Your sinks, a huge portion of your sink is made of plastic. Your faucets are plastic. Your countertops are all plastic. Everything is plastic. So in general, we say, yeah, you can't kasher plastic, but it's not that simple, because ultimately we do kasher certain things. It really does depend on the kind of plastic and how it's being used. So let's talk about that. Now that that's been said, let's talk about sinks and countertops. Now, sinks, if it's metal, it's really, really simple. You don't use the sink for 24 hours. And as I said before, since the sink is not on the stovetop, you're not boiling water in the sink. At most, you're pouring hot water or hot stuff onto the sink. The way you kasher it is also by pouring hot water over the sink. So here's a bit of advice I once heard, and I thought it was fantastic advice. Go to Home Depot and you can buy these large metal flower watering pots. I don't know what they're called, but they're large and they're metal. They're huge. You cut off, if there's like a grate at the end, you kind of use a hacksaw and you cut that off, but you fill that with water and you boil it, and you boil the water in the watering pot. That watering pot can hold a huge amount of water in it, and you have absolute control over where that water will go, because you have this long spout. So you can use that to pour water. The hot water has to be poured over the entirety of the sink. You can't just let the water run from one side to the other side. You have to actually pour it over every part of the sink. If you have that level of control that flower pot provides, that's the way to do it. That is the best possible way to kasher your sink. Now, also for the faucet, you want to pour water over the faucet. Likewise, also the handles, things do occasionally splash there. Hot water definitely does get on that. For the inside of your faucet, you want to take this pot of water. You want to sort of get a small pot of water and put it underneath where the faucet actually comes out, so you can get that area where the water comes out, and you can get that area. Now, because this is why I'm saying that we do kasher plastic, because very often the filter on the inside and the tubing that comes through until the very end, that's plastic, and we are relying on hot water to kasher it. So we do rely on kashering plastic under many circumstances, but it's not something that we employ all the time. Now, a porcelain sink can't be kashered. So the advice one has is to put down something like a contact paper on the inside. Well, you clean as best you can. You put down contact paper on the inside, something that's obviously waterproof, or use an insert. Like, you can use a wash basin. Though that's the best thing to use. Don't put food directly onto the sink. And if you're going to be washing any dishes in the sink, don't wash them in the sink. Wash them in the dish pan in the sink. That's a better way to do it. Now, everybody knows you can kasher metal countertops. I would not recommend kashering metal countertops. What I recommend everybody does, for no matter what kind of countertop they have, and I do believe you can kasher all materials for countertops. I do not have a problem with kashering anything on a countertop. However, when it comes to Pesach, we have a technicality, and that is that there cannot be any residue whatsoever. When it comes to regular keeping kosher, a very small, minute amount of non-kosher stuff won't make my kosher stuff not kosher. When it comes to Pesach, that's not exactly the case. No matter how immaculate your kitchen is, if you run your hand along a counter, if you've lived in the house for more than a year, you will find grooves, you'll find little nicks, you'll find all sorts of little imperfections because you're a human being and you're using your kitchen, and that's just what happens. Things get shaped by their users. I think it's really hard to kosher all those things for Pesach. I recommend that if you want to kosher them, that's fine, but put something down on the countertop, either something like a contact paper. What I very often use, I'll use a double layer of foil that I tape down. You can buy corrugated plastic at Home Depot or Lowe's. Rona is where I used to buy it from, but Rona is now no longer Rona. It's gone the way that all Canadian companies go when they meet an American. I don't recommend koshering countertops. I do say you can kosher every countertop, and I would kosher any countertop, making it kosher to make, if you're moving in for the first time and you're koshering it for the first time, I would definitely come in and help you do that. But I would not do that I would not recommend you do that for Pesach. Again, it's because of all the nicks and the grooves, there can be some residual stuff that you can't possibly clean, and you can't kosher it if it's not immaculately cleaned, and the most minute amount of non-chametz will make a problem. So I don't recommend that people kosher countertops, even though it is possible. Now, let's talk about glassware and cups. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you can put a glassware into a bathtub, fill the bathtub full of water, let it sit there for 24 hours, drain it, fill it up again, drain it, fill it up again. So then you've repeated this for 3 times. It has been sitting in water for 72 hours at least. That's how one would kosher glass drinking ware. Now, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a story. I lived in London, as most of you know, for a period of time. Now, in London, the way they conceive of space is different than we do in North America. I'll give you an example. When my wife was asked by our landlord if she would like to have a dryer washer as a single unit, my wife said no, because I want to be able to do both at the same time. But she wasn't thinking like somebody who lives in England. In England, they don't have to budget time; they have to budget space. There isn't enough room to have both a washer and a dryer in an English laundry room. There just isn't enough space. So it makes sense to have one unit that does both. And that mentality, because space is at a premium, really does run through the society, and everybody there will just take all of their weekday cutlery and just kosher it for Pesach. It's a pain. So you have to wash everything. You can't use it for 24 hours. And the same is true with it when it comes to drinkware and glassware. I don't recommend that you use glass that are used during the rest of the year and use them on Pesach through this method. I really highly recommend that you buy some Pesach glasses and get something cheap. Go to the dollar shop. Doesn't have to be fancy unless you want it to be fancy. You can get really nice glass stuff. I'd recommend that you actually just buy Pesach glasses and not use this method. We're not in London. We have space, we have room, and life isn't as expensive here as it is there. Yes, life is expensive here too. Glasses are really cheap. You can go to like a Bianca Moore's liquidation store and buy them for 20 cents a pop. Very nice glasses. I recommend that people do that. And with everything, I recommend that if whenever possible, buy something special for Pesach. Don't use and don't kosher unless you don't have a choice. Like an oven, you don't have a choice. But I don't recommend, for example, that you kosher your food processor, which we will talk about. Yes, you can kosher your food processor. I don't recommend it. You can buy something cheap at Walmart. You're only using it for a week. I very highly recommend that you get small items that are easy to bring upstairs, downstairs, and that don't take up a ton of space. I recommend that you just buy a special one for Pesach. But again, we'll talk about we'll get to food processor and blenders in just a moment. All right, now cupboards and drawers. What do you do for cupboards and drawers? For cupboards and drawers, I would recommend that you wipe them all out, and that's it. That's all you need to do. Some people have a practice of putting down like contact paper, especially in places where you put food in direct contact with various items. It's a nice thing to do. Yeah, if you're putting food in there, probably you should. But if you're putting food in packaging, you don't have to put down any contact paper. It just has to be cleaned. All right.
But cupboards and drawers that you're not going to use for Pesach.
It doesn't hurt to clean them out. You don't have to clean them, but it doesn't hurt. if you're anyways cleaning up all your, yeah, if you're not going to be using them, you don't have to clean them up. That's not a problem. Tabletops, high chairs, tablecloths. Well, tablecloths you put into the washing machine, that's fine. High chairs, you're not giving your kids tons of food that is that's hot on a high chair, right? You really just have to hose it down. Soap is a good thing to do if you want to put some contact paper down on the tray, but I wouldn't worry excessive about it. Just take it outside, out back, and just hose it. On tabletops, obviously, you're not going to pour boiling water in your tabletop. So you just want to put down something vinyl, 2 layers, if possible. That would be the best thing to do. And that would be that's what I do with my tabletops. All right, can openers.
Can I just ask one thing about high chairs?
Go ahead.
I'd read that like clean it really well, but then I'd read you couldn't rinse it off in your Pesach sink, like even once it's been cleaned. Can you?
You can, but with cold water.
With cold water? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can with cold water. Can openers. Can openers are interesting. In general, we say that if you can clean something and it doesn't come in contact with hot food or food in general, it's probably fine. But can openers are difficult to clean because you have all these little nooks and crannies. If you can get like a brush in and get every part of the can opener, then you can just use your regular weekday can opener, your non-Pesach can opener. But again, they come a dime a dozen. You can go to Walmart, you can go to a dollar shop and buy pretty cheap and expensive stuff. I would recommend that also. But if you're stuck for can openers, like if you were living in London, then yeah, I would just recommend you get a scrubby brush and you get every nook and cranny out as best you can. Now, candlesticks and trays. Now, these things don't come in contact with food generally. You're not cooking off of them. So they don't present too much of a problem, but you should still clean them in case they've been splattered with food. I have small kids and I know that chicken soup gets tossed around the room every year or so. And so I would clean the candlesticks. I would clean the tray. I would not put it under hot water after Pesach has begun, similar to the high chair tray. If you're going to put them in the sink, you can just use cold water. That would be adequate. Colanders, you can't really clean all that well because they have so many little holes. You really can't use your non-Pesach ones for Pesach ones. Coffee makers are a little bit complicated, and every coffee maker is somewhat different. They are relatively inexpensive, and again, I would recommend you get one like a cheap small one for Pesach if you're devoted to your coffee maker. If you want to kasher your coffee maker, give me a call and we will talk about how that gets done. Keurigs can be kashered very easily if you don't use them with any flavored coffee. You just let it sit for 24 hours and then you just put a hot water cycle through your Keurig, because the only thing that really comes in contact with hot that's problematic is the needle. So Keurigs are very easy to kasher. Again, if you'd like some help with that, I'm happy to do so. Refrigerators and freezers, these things should be cleaned very, very well, but you don't need to put any contact paper down. Some people do. It's not a bad thing to do. I would remove the ice trays though and put them in a different location, because ice trays are not like they're inside of the fridge. The ice trays leave the fridge and come in contact with other things. So if you're devoted to having if you're devoted to having your ice cubes on Pesach, again, you can get them at the dollar shop. I would recommend you do that. Food processors and blenders. Now, food processors and blenders, you need to, let's talk about a blender, for example. The glass that is in a blender or the plastic holding canister of a food processor, that is really difficult to clean. You have to take them apart and you have to go into like the little spring mechanisms. The actual machine base is fine. You just have to clean that thoroughly. But the actual canisters themselves, you should get special Pesach ones. The blades on the inside, those things, if you can take them out, like you would have to kash them like you would any other knife. And again, just like any other knife, you have to scrub it down, let it sit for 24 hours, then you put it into a pot of boiling water. But again, I would recommend that you get a cheap one for Pesach. Now I have over here a list of things that can't be kasher: toaster ovens, dishwashers. Toaster ovens, that's a hard and fast rule. You can't kasher a toaster oven. When it comes to a dishwasher, it can be more complicated. Generally, I would recommend that people just wash their dishes, but I know that that's not always possible. I know that's not always reasonable. If you are going to be having quite a number of guests over Pesach and you do not have any helpers with you in the kitchen, give me a call, because each dishwasher is somewhat different. They all have different mechanisms and different realities. There might be, they're not all of them. I wouldn't make this a hard and fast rule saying that you cannot kosher them. Some of them can be koshered. I would only recommend koshering them if you are in a situation where you're going to have a lot of guests and it's just not practical for you to sit there and wash dishes all night long. But if under, like, if you're having like a dinner party or you're having a ton of people over for your Pesach Sidorim, give me a call and I'll talk to you about what your dishwasher looks like. And there is a possibility. As I said earlier, I do kosher plastic, and everybody's koshering plastic these days. The hard and fast rule about not koshering plastic is not so hard and fast. Now, hot water urns are much the same. Generally speaking, if you have a hot water urn, if you, for example, put up it on your Shabbos on your counter on Shabbos, and you're putting your loaves of challah on it to warm them up, that's chametzik. There's nothing you can do about it. But if you've never used it for that, and in general, it's been kept away from other, where other foodstuffs are, like if you have a special counter in your kitchen, that's not where you're sort of blending your using your immersion blender, making a smoothie. There is something to talk about. So again, give me a call and we can talk about that. Now, blechs again are things that cannot be koshered. All right, now there are kosher spices available in Sobeys, I believe, and I think I saw some in Superstore. Yes, I did see some in Superstore the other day when I was there. So if whenever possible, buy spices that are listed as kosher for Passover. The reason why you want spices that are listed as kosher for Passover is because very often they have additives and preservatives that they don't list because it's so minute. Things like BHT, which is a citric acid. Citric acid can be sourced from kitnios, it can be sourced from chametz. If you cannot find any kosher Pesach spices, then these are the items here that you can buy. If you look through the ingredients and you see nothing other than the native ingredient and nothing else, then these are the items that you can rely on, do not have other additives. But I would never recommend buying these if you have kosher for Pesach list available products. Ground black pepper is one, paprika is another, or oregano is a third, cinnamon is a fourth, garlic powder and onion powder. These are the spices that I've done a lot of research into that never contain the preservatives that we are concerned about. Always get kosher for Pesach spices. If you can't, these are the ones to buy without kosher for Pesach supervision. Now, also, when it comes to toiletries, things like deodorants, we in general say that if it is a physical substance like a deodorant bar that you rub on yourself, that doesn't have to be kosher for Pesach. That's not edible. There's nothing in there that anyone will ever eat, and therefore there's no problem there. However, if it is a liquid, there is a process for making that alcohol usable again. It's what's called chametz nuksha, chametz that is present. It's not consumable right now, but it can be made a chametzdik, and that is also a form of chametz. You can't eat it. And it's also you shouldn't own it, or you also shouldn't apply it to yourself because that's considered to be a form of consumption. You look at these ingredients here. These ingredients you should consider as being possibly chametzdik: ethanol, ethyl alcohol, denatured alcohol. I think this is I'm not sure what the S is, but all these are just various forms of denatured alcohol or just generic alcohol. Don't buy it or don't use it if you can. If you're going to, for example, using deodorant, use a bar, don't use a liquid. Now, I use liquids just because I'm for Shabbos reasons, but for Pesach, I do use a bar, or I get a deodorant that does not have any of these ingredients. If you have something that is an isopropyl, or that's a benzyl alcohol or acetyl alcohol, those things are toxic and they can never be made drinkable. And as such, they're never a problem. So again, if you look for toiletries, anything that contains any of these kinds of grain-based alcohols, you should not use unless it's a solid. If it's a liquid, you can't use it. When it comes to even liquids that contain the isopropyl alcohols and their derivatives and other forms of inedible alcohols, those things can be used even on Pesach, even in the liquid form. So a hand sanitizer, for example, that has isopropyl alcohol, you can use on Pesach, but not a hand sanitizer that has ethanol or ethyl alcohol or denatured alcohol. All right. That is everything that I wanted to cover, and I am open for any questions, comments, or rebuttals. And again, if you have any questions about the specifics of your household, I'm always available. If I can answer, I will. If I can't, I will call you back. But please do leave a message. In general, I don't call people back if they don't leave messages, because I figured if it was important enough, they'd leave a message. Otherwise, it might have just been a pocket call. So please, if you're going to give me a call, leave a message or send me a text. All right. And you all have the ability to unmute. And if you have a question to ask, by all means, go ahead.
You don't
It's
have any, oh, go ahead.
Oh, mine's quick. It's Paige here. Is there any issue with using disposables at all?
Well, that's a fantastic question. So when I was a kid, I remember my parents saying that that paper plates, for example, had starch in them that was possibly problematic. I remember then as a young adult and in my early 20s, living in the United States, and nobody had heard of this, and they all thought I was crazy for not wanting to use paper plates. But then all of a sudden, the Star K came out about 5 years ago saying the same thing. Yeah, there's starches in paper. If you get the plastic, get the ones that are plastic coated or the styrofoam. If you're going to use the paper, then yeah, they have starches in them, and that could potentially leak into your food.
Or styrofoam? Thank you.
Not at all. I remember also the rabbi said that there was perhaps even a problem with coffee filters. I don't think that's the case. I did look into paper plates, and yeah, they do contain starches to hold them, and he holds their form nice and taut. Filters you don't have to worry about. Filters do not have any starch in them. They might have had in the past, but they don't currently. Amy, you had a question.
Yeah, I did. We do have an induction stovetop, and if you don't have too many other questions, I'd be interested in knowing what special things need to be done.
Okay, so an induction stovetop. Let me just get my notes out here.
Because you put anything on it, it will talk to you. It'll squeak and squeal till you take it off. And you can't just turn a burner on. It has to have a pot, a metal pot on the burner for the burner to come on.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the mechanism. I'm just double checking. What I believe you need to do is let it sit for 20, it has to be thoroughly clean. You let it sit for 24 hours, and then you pour hot water on it like you do a countertop. That's essentially it.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, Malkadina Lewis. It's a fantastic question. When I used to live in Calgary, when Rabbi Miller was the rabbi here, he used to put me in charge of making all the Pesach halachic decisions, and I used to run things by him, and he agreed with me when it came to quinoa. You have to look at your quinoa. You have to sort of look it over to make sure everything that's there is actually quinoa. Then you wash it. Yeah, and it should be washed before Pesach, and that's all you need to do. There are the Star K, for example, and most other kosher supervision agencies do say that no, it has to be labeled as kosher for Pesach. I disagree, and I Rabbi Miller is he's a very competent halakhic authority, and and if he said it was okay, I'm happy continuing that practice. And for Calgary, I think we can definitely do that. You have to look it over. You have to wash it before Pesach, but that's it. Well, it mentioned a dust buster. A dust buster, you can use a dust buster like you can use a vacuum. You just have to clean it up before Pesach. You just have to empty out the stuff that's inside it before Pesach begins. But yeah, you can use it. It's fine. That's right. I remember seeing a dust buster at your house. You're the only person I know who still has one.
We had an old school one, but we actually just replaced it with a more recent version that has more power and battery.
Understood. All right. Anyone else?
So for microwaves and the glass plate that sort of goes in the circle, are you saying that has to be covered? Is there no way to
just get like a parchment paper, cut a parchment paper to size, and that's it. You're good.
I've never done that before, so this may be the first year.
Enjoy.
We have a clear plastic covering over our tablecloth for our Shabbos table. I would assume that needs to be replaced for Pesach. It can't be flipped
right.
over or
No,
Kept-
I wouldn't flip it over. No, I would buy it new. When I was a
New one?
kid, my mother would buy a new one every Pesach. That's when we got our new one.
oh yeah, I guess replace it yearly. Okay. Yep. Thanks.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Yes, it's Debbie here. I don't know why, but it's not looking right, the icons for the microphone. I'm just wondering, when you were talking about the glass stovetop we've got, I've covered it every year. I cover the inner parts, like not including, and it's quite a puzzle to do, but I've always covered it with foil. And then I have to change the cover after the first days of Yontif. But somebody posted, and I think it was on this group. Does anybody
I
recall?
think I posted it.
What's that? Was that you?
Yeah, I think it's Jessica. I think I posted it, and
Yeah.
it was like a cloth, apparently like a heat resistant to very high.
Amazon sells those. Yeah, you just get
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that's all you need.
What's it called? What is this? What?
I
Let's
can
look up
send
a
you the
stove
link
glass
if you-
top protector. Let's go into Amazon. You can find it there for like glass stovetop protector or cover.
So it's not like the old fashioned covers for like old stoves. You could get little covers for, because this, you're not
No, this
wanting
is
to
sil-
cover
It's silicone. Let me- They're
silicone.
Yeah.
Would you would you text
The
me
one
a
that I
link
posted actually wasn't silicone, but
don't know.
it was something similar.
or yeah, okay, I'll check Amazon. So
I'll send you a link
silicone-
too, Deb.
Sorry.
I'll send you what I have, and you can also check Amazon and decide what you like best.
Okay, thanks.
Wait a second. Let me, I can just post it here. I'm on Amazon right now. And here, I'm seeing what Jessica posted. I'm looking for what I had. There are these things you put over the top. A stovetop liner, it's called. Oh, these look a lot newer than the ones I remember. I'm gonna just take this, I'm gonna copy, and I'm gonna post it into the Zoom chat, and you can all just click on it and see it for yourself. There you go. Or Debbie, if you click, I just put the link on Amazon, you can just see numerous different varieties of this product. If you open up your chat
there.
box.
Okay. Hi. Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, and I popped in the one that I saw, which I don't know, it's not silicone, and I couldn't tell from the group here in Winnipeg whether there was an issue shipping it to Canada, because people talked about buying it, and then I don't know, I wondered if it ran into problems.
Okay, well, the
How
one
do I
I
get back to your link on this?
I
you go
put the
to-
link, it's the cooktop mat is what it's called.
Okay.
There
Great.
are a plethora on Amazon. You can click there and you can get them on Amazon.ca. They're
The
there.
Amazon ones look great, so.
And Jessica, I did open your link and it says, do you want it shipped to Canada? So I presume it'll all be more expensive for shipping, but still doable.
Yeah, that's what I would assume too. It was interesting. If anyone ever gets it, I'm interested to hear how it works. Because I thought about getting it for my hot plate, to cover my hot plate instead of aluminum foil.
So it will work on a glass top stove?
That is what it looked like when
Oh.
that's what it's
They're
designed
made-
for. I thought of it.
Yeah,
for
they're
hot
made for
plate.
One
glass.
here.
customers.
There's
you.
one here. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. There's one here. I see silicone electric stovetop cover, and it's $52 from Amazon CA.
All right.
Debbie, is that for one or for
For the entire stovetop.
For the set? Okay, perfect.
Yeah. If there's shipping, if someone wants to do it with me, we could share shipping. Okay. I've never heard of this before. That's great. And for the microwave, I always just had to remove my glass. I didn't think that I could use it. I didn't know you could cover it. So when you're saying cover it with parchment paper, you're just saying like just the top.
Yeah.
You don't have to
The
cover.
top that comes in contact with food.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Great.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Well, if nobody else has any questions, comments, or rebuttals, I will end the class. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Rabbi. That
Rabbi.
was very helpful.
Lila Tov,
Thank you,
everyone.
Rabbi. Have a
Thank
good
you,
night.
Rabbi.
Thank
Thank you.
Be well, everybody.
Bye.